Hello Internet Explorers. You join us as we leave Barcelona. But if you see us in the next episode leaving Valencia in the same positions and the same clothes, it's not because we forgot to do the Barcelona chapter.
We are professionals. Welcome to the long free ride. It was a shame to be leaving Barcelona after just one day, but the hotels are expensive and still on antibiotics for a chest infection. I could really only do one day of moderate activity before needing a recharge. Speaking of which, we had 2 charging stops planned today. To avoid too much city driving to get to a Barcelona charger, we headed off to Valencia, with our first stop being near a town called Tarragona. The planning software showed that we would need to keep our speed to below 50 miles an hour in order to make it. The second stop was around 40 miles outside Valencia at a town called Castello. Once again, to avoid too much city driving, we planned not to charge in Valencia. Instead, we'd make a stop en route to our next destination. Once we were free of the city traffic, it was a beautiful day to be on the road.
We got very lucky with the first charging stop of the day. It turned out to be a very lovely country house hotel with beautiful views. It's called Mas La Boella and it's near the city of Tarragona.
Now turn right to stay on Aques al Hotel. Now your destination is on the right.
It's set in 110 hectares of olive groves and it has 6,500 square metres of its own gardens, including an outdoor pool. The hotel promotes having its own library and a very successful restaurant. Sadly, we were too late to order breakfast with them and too early for lunch, so we just had a coffee in the really pretty courtyard listening to the water fountain. If I get a chance, however, I'd love to book an overnight stay here as it seemed peaceful and out of the way, despite being quite close to the motorway.
After our caffeine recharged, it was back on the road heading southwest a few miles inland from the coast and with the hills of the Serra de Mondstadt on our right. At Castello, we grabbed some lunch out in the sunshine as Elon took care of our charging. Then it was off into Valencia to find our accommodation and parking. Our accommodation was in the newly developed part of the city. Known as Quatre Carreras, it is in the southeast of Valencia and quite close to the Jardin del Turia, a green swathe of parkland that is 5.6 miles long. It also had a handy metro station nearby. We loaded up a couple of travel cards with some journey credits and headed for Alameda Station, which brought us up into the park. The Jardin del Turia was once the course of the River Turia, which after a major flood in 1957 was redirected around the city. It now provides a fantastic leisure and recreation area. Climbing out of the park, we dived into the narrow streets and squares of the old town, on our way to Valencia's historic cathedral.
Most of the cathedral was built between the 13th and 15th century in Gothic style, but given construction took centuries, it actually incorporates a variety of artistic styles. We entered through the Door of Irons, which is a Baroque-style door, but the Apostles' Door is Gothic, and the oldest door, the Elms Door, is actually Romanesque. It seems that the cathedral was built over the site of an ancient Visiogothic cathedral, which later became a mosque. However, the mosque was demolished to build the cathedral with 8 chapels, and expansions kept being added to this cathedral. For example, the chapel that today houses the Holy Grail would have originally been a separate chapter house where the canons met to discuss internal affairs. Over the years, the nave and the transepts were extended to include that chapter house and the Miguelet Tower.
The many chapels within the cathedral contain religious art painted in the 15th century. It gave the place a feeling of an art gallery as well as a place of worship. Sadly, there was a fire during the Spanish Civil War, and some of the cathedral's decorations were damaged or lost.
The musical angels on this starry blue background cover the dome above the main altar. It dates from the 15th century and is a good example of Renaissance art by Rodrigo de Borja.
Our audio tour of the cathedral ended up in the chapel housing the Cup of Christ, or Holy Chalice, or more famously, the Holy Grail. This is said to be the cup that was used by Christ at the Last Supper. Numerous popes have acknowledged its authenticity, but there are also many who doubt its provenance. Elements such as the handles and base have been added and are not from the period. So this made me think.
You must choose. But choose wisely.
I'll leave you to answer that question.
After all the culture at the cathedral, we found a restaurant in the square for a cheeky Aperol spritz and some traditional Valencian paella. Once again, there were water fountains running, giving a lovely subtle background music. After lunch, as we set off to tour the Silk Exchange, we happened to wander past the Valencia food market. It's one of the largest markets in Europe, but it was shut when we walked past, so we really need to prioritise seeing food markets in the morning. I'm told the beauty of this building particularly is the light that enters through the roof at various points and has coloured panelled windows which reflect on the floor. This lovely building used to be a financial centre for the Valencia silk trade. The detail on it shows it to be a 15th century Gothic masterpiece and was constructed between 1482 and 1533. It has 3 parts: the walled orange garden, the main trading hall and the contract room, which housed the Tribunal del Mar. This is apparently the room where the tribunal team decided that if they were going to imprison merchants for non-payment of their debts, they were then marched across the courtyard to the jail that was in the central tower. The trading room is a huge, lavishly decorated space supported by these gorgeous twisted columns. John spent ages with his new 360-degree camera getting shots that would do justice to the decoration and scale of this hall. There's a Latin inscription across the 4 walls that show it's not necessary to be a Protestant or a foreigner to establish the basis of a good trade, and it also showed the union of ethics and economy. That inscription basically means that they've got principles upon which the trade within the hall is based: absolute honesty of its traders and the principle of getting justice. That's a bit like having a modern day company outline their vision and mission statements, then put the HR department in the room next door so that if anybody breaks that code, they can be immediately fired or even imprisoned.
After lunch, we decided to wander the city streets, heading for the Serranos Gate. This was one of 12 gateways in the old city in the Middle Ages and is the best preserved. It also stands on the banks of the old River Turia, so would give us access to the park and a walk back to the metro station. We both really enjoyed walking through the streets of the old city. There was very little traffic and there were always sights to draw you further forward. After an ice cream to ward off the heat, we found ourselves in a beautiful square with a fantastic fountain and a road leading off to another entrance to the cathedral. They were preparing the square for some form of festival, and colourful banners were draped on many buildings. After a bit more wandering, we ended up at the Serranos Gates. One of the reasons the gates was preserved when the city walls were demolished is that it also acted as a prison. The gate guards the royal road to Barcelona. Heading back into the park, this area had lots of sports fields and their supported changing rooms, etc. These had been graffitied, but for some reason it was in English. Perhaps you can tell us your thoughts in the comments as to why this should be. On the way back to our accommodation, we had to switch metro lines, and coming up to the surface, we bumped into the main station and also the city's bullring. In the evening, we visited the modern part of the city.
Valencia have invested millions and millions of euros in creating this scientific and cultural leisure complex, the City of Arts and Sciences. It covers another 2 kilometres of the dried up riverbed and is listed as one of the 12 treasures of Spain according to the World Atlas. There are 5 key areas and it took us over an hour to walk alongside just 3 of them. When we arrived, there was music pumping and some sort of outdoor team running competition going on, but we didn't get involved. It was a bit late in the day and John really wasn't feeling that well. The Science Museum, quite cutely really, is apparently made to resemble the skeleton of a whale, and inside all of the exhibitions are completely interactive and feature both science and technology experiments. They actively encourage children to get hands-on. The Umbracal is an open access garden covering 17,000 metres squared. It was a lovely path surrounded by palm trees, native bitter orange trees, rosemary, lavender and honeysuckle. And it really was very romantic to walk through here and feel like you're in a botanical garden rather than a purpose-built concrete area with several modern museum buildings. The hemispheric dome is actually a 3D IMAX cinema with a 900-metre concave screen. It's been built to resemble a giant eyelid that opens to access the surrounding waterpool, and apparently it's a symbol of the Eye of Wisdom. It also has a planetarium and a laserium for family entertainment. Finally, we reached the Palace of Arts, which is a music hall that stages concerts, operas and even ballet. It looked like the roof was flying. On the walk back, past a shopping centre, there was a very cute series of fountains. And lots of children, you can imagine, running through these tunnels during the summer and enjoying spraying themselves with water. I couldn't resist a little cheeky splash of JD.
Wow, what a day that was in Valencia. But it's not all fun, we've got to do the stats. In this episode we drove 240 miles, which is 386 kilometres.
We charged the car with 112 kilowatts across 2 charging stops this time. We were stationary for 1 hour and 18 minutes in total.
Both of our charges were at Tesla Superchargers, and so we didn't get charged for those. But if we didn't have the free supercharging, it would have cost us £27.30. We had no issues with the car, so there were no ancillary costs.
Now let's add that to the grand total for the trip so far. We hope the long free ride is demonstrating that you can do long road trips in an electric vehicle. Please like, share and subscribe to the channel to help us bring this message to a wider audience. What are you doing, John?
I'm cutting up a fallen tree.
Why are you cutting up a fallen tree on holiday?
Because it's blocking the road.
How did you know about this?
Because the police came and got me out of bed.
Lovely.
They were really impressed with me in my underpants. as anybody would be.